my name is Zophoniasdottir. I'm the learning orchestrator at Climate-KIC, and we are talking about Systems Innovation Learning Partnership. And Karolina?
And I'm Karolina. I'm a senior learning facilitator with the SILP. Sola, would you like to tell us how SILP started? You were there from the very beginning.
Yeah, thanks. So we started our Systems Innovation Learning Partnership in collaboration with the Swedish International Development Agency. And the collaboration essentially started on trying to understand what it does take to shift mindsets and grow capabilities that enable sustainable and transformations to happen. So within the SILP Learning Partnership, we are essentially trying to grow our own capabilities and the capabilities of CEDA to work in a systemic way, trying to understand what are the barriers to collaboration, what is the barriers to us acting in a transformative way in our own ecosystems, and how might we change our approaches in our own ways of working, and how might we also support other organizations in changing the way that they connect to one another in order for them to work more systemically. I think that that's maybe my first initial thoughts on that, and then what we do within that. So what does it actually concretely mean? I think maybe if you can start, then I can supplement there.
You know, I'm maybe going to enter it from another angle, just give it a shot to anybody who's wondering, you know, like, where is that placed in the world at all, and what is it about? I'm thinking to myself, you know, like, there are so many people trying to do the best they can at their work and still noticing that the results that they're producing are not the results that they wish to have, and are not the results that actually the world needs and the challenges that we're facing needs. So SILP really is this place that, you know, like, we as Climate-KIC, we speak a lot about the messy middle, but when we're honest, even internally, we might admit to you that nobody likes being in the messy middle. Messy middle sucks. It's muck, it's sticky, you have no idea where you're going, what you're doing. And still, you know, like, when you want to advance on certain complex challenges, there's no way around than being in the messy middle, and being in the messy middle together with others that belong to the same challenge. So SILP, in a way, is our, you know, like, grown-up playground, our grown-up playground to being in the messy middle together, to developing compassion and empathy with one another. When we fail, when we lose our way, but also when we develop beauty, and when we develop solutions that are kind of beyond what we were hoping to achieve. So this is what it has, you know, like, turned out to be in practice. I remember at the beginning, you know, like, for me, it was quite difficult to understand what it is about. And then just really understanding, you know, like, there is the climate challenge, something that nobody knows, honestly, how to tackle, and something that we need to have resolved the day before yesterday. And coming together with a number of actors as CEDA, but also the experiments that we support inside of our experimentation fund, which are 7 experiments across the globe. This has showed us how to admit to each other the places where it's difficult to know how to go further, and how to admit to each other the places where the old no longer is working and we don't know yet the new. So this is a place where to figure out in the professional context how to be in these spaces and how to progress on that work.
Yeah, and if I can take the ball there and add a little bit on, I think in terms of our work with our experiments, I think that connecting it back to, we don't really know how to change, and it really requires that we actually take the moment with one another, with our, in this case, with our experimenters, and think through where is it that we actually need to experiment, not only in projects, but also in supporting frames in terms of how we connect to one another, how our funding systems and our rules and regulations around project spaces where is it that we can actually test new things and sort of elbow our way a little bit in experimenting how things can look differently. And I think that this is the SILP partnership is one of those learning partnerships where we are thinking about and trying to understand what is the changes that can that we can experiment with in this partnership, and how can that inform other projects that CEDA, Climate-KIC, all actors that are wanting to engage in positive climate action or systemic transformation. What is it that they can essentially learn from us trying funding differently, from us building projects differently? And I think for me, the key outcome that SILP then could have is for us to commit to learning across all those different fields, and then sharing that outcome generously, and then build forward more learning partnerships. But Karolina, I'm curious about your thoughts on that outcome.
You know, like I'm going back to the initial thought that we had with funding, which was we wanted to transition away from funding for results to funding for learning, right? And we were wondering, how, you know, like how would that operate, and what results would it actually yield, right? If you don't focus so diligently on results, but focus on systemic learning, how do you approach that at all? And one of the consequences of us funding for learning has been that we actually engaged with our experiments in a different way. That means when we were even at the contracting level with experiments, and experiment members would come to us and say, "Oh, we have a difficulty here or there." We wouldn't say, "And we're sorry, it's not aligned with our guidelines, so we cannot accept you." But we said, let's sit down together and figure it out. And this approach of sitting down together and figuring it out, and sitting down together and in a dialogic exchange, trying to understand what's behind the difficulty that you're facing now, and how can we come together in that? This has actually had a very powerful impact that we have not only seen in the way how we come together with the cohort. So we not only have funded the 7 experiments, but we're also on a 1-year-long journey together, where the experiments meet on periodic level. And we tell each other, how does our learning journey develop? What are we struggling with? What are we proud of? How are our relationships with the local community? And what we have observed is that as extending the trust and really leaning into relating with one another and being interested in each other and creating also structures to be there for one another, this has actually rippled throughout the systems, and it has allowed the experiments and encouraged them to extend the trust and extend the interest and the relationality to their own systems, by this changing the quality of how we come together to tackle these like really complex challenges.
And I think that focus that you're bringing here on that actually relationship building is really a part of the work, and that all of us focusing in on that how do we build better relationships for better outcomes and impact, but for learning, for not for sort of a standard predefined outcome is really important. And I'm just thinking back to the experiments. I know that there has been beautiful relationships created there between the experimenters as well. I don't know, Karolina, if you have something that you would like to sort of mention or highlight there.
There is, for example, women river ambassadors in Uganda, and they are empowering women, so-called river ambassadors, in early stage climate disaster responses. And one of the things that they have understood by empowering women and working with women predominantly and creating these women circles, at some point they realized we need to include men in our work as well, because if we don't include men, then they cannot be natural allies that actually these women need for the communities to support them in their work and support them also in being successful. Another example might be Railway Children India, who take care of unaccompanied children traveling on trains, who have began a really incredibly successful collaboration with Railway India, in which they have found out that officers on the railway, they are really eager to collaborate and to support children that are traveling unaccompanied. And they are really eager to do it for free. They don't need a compensation for that. They are really eager to do that as part of their work, and there is a support also of their management for that. But what does make a difference are felicitations. So it means celebrating people for their effort. That actually increases their rank in their society and empowers them and gives them a confirmation. But I also don't want to, like sell it as if just relating would be a silver bullet. We have one of the examples that is Power Compost in Colombia. And I remember one of the times we had a conversation and they said, we were very thrilled. We were very excited. We managed to convene many stakeholders who work with the topic of organic trash in Chia, in a community they're working in. And we thought, because we're all in the same field, we're all united by the same purpose, we're going to be able to just kick off and run at grand speed. And what turned out is that actually this coming together stopped them in their process, because they need to build trust, right? So sometimes you believe, like when there is enough of common denominator, we're gonna be able to be faster. But it's not always the case, right? And one of the things we have learned with our cohort, so with all the experiments that we have funded for the year, is really paying attention to the systems, paying attention to what's happening in the system, and trying to respond to it in a systemic way best we can.
Mm-hmm. And I think that I'm so happy that you brought that forward, because I think that relates to one of the things that we continuously come across in terms of that we will learn and then it will become easier. And I think the invitation with the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership and other learning partnerships and other learning efforts that we are working on and convening our communities into is to work with one another on understanding that in order for us to make systemic impact, we actually also need to accept that the work doesn't necessarily become easier, but that we can lean into it. We can build resilience together. We can build each other's curiosity, and we can actually really bring this perspectives of how might we change our current structures in order for us to be able to work in a different way. But that takes us building these types of or convening around multitudes of different types of learning in food systems, learning in mobility systems, or learning across. And I think that that's one of the things that this learning partnership also does, is to not think about very specific sectors or very specific themes, but what happens when we collaborate widely with different challenges and challenge owners in terms of that. So I think that that's one of the interesting things around the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership that we've got going with CEDA. I think for us, we are also so curious in terms of what happens and what would happen if we would bring this logic of learning partnerships into other arenas, because I think we've learned a lot here. We're eager to disseminate that, but we can't learn from written best practice cases. We have to be in learning together. And I think that that's one of the things that for me is really an invitation out, that we want to collaborate and create more learning partnerships, more understandings of people that are ready to come into and want to experiment with how to build their understanding of complexity, understanding of what can they test and experiment with, not only in their own organizational setting, but with other organizations as well.
So there's this one example from the cohort is a Serbian project called NALE. They're working on citizen engagement in urban planning. So this is right, like a very specific direction. And through coming together in the cohort and sharing, it turned out that development alternatives in India, who are actually developing a network of e-rickshaws, women-driven e-rickshaws, you know, like they're quite far away from one another. There is some urban planning common denominator, but it turned out that in their work, you know, like even though their application fields were really distant from each other, the challenges and the dynamics in the system they met over and over again were very similar, to an extent where they could really do a very good translation of how they approach the challenges and how they engage together with others to progress on this challenge. So I would also say, you know, like if there is a challenge that you really care for, if there is a challenge that the world actually needs somebody to pick up and progress on and create different results, and one step back, create different processes to get to these results. And if you know that, you know, like the road to that might be through the valley of tears, how the messy middle sometimes is called as well, I also really do believe that learning partnerships is something that we're just beginning to explore the power of.
I fully second that. I know that we are deep in this learning partnership environment, but I think that we are really getting feedback that this is a good way of convening, and this is a good way of organizations, communities, and individuals to take the first steps in collaborating widely with different actors who play different roles in terms of creating systemic impact. And I think that that's the invitation.
So we hope to hear from you, and we hope you're having a wonderful day.
Thanks for the chat.